We're used to this now. Like the settling time, ice breaking. It always happens. It's a very interesting topic today. Hi, Professor Sancheti.
Hello. Good morning, Saurabh. Good evening to everyone from India.
Good evening, Sancheti sir. कैसे हैं आप?
बिल्कुल ठीक हूँ. कैसे हैं आप रघुवीर जी? How are you?
Good. Yeah, after that loss, hope you are recovered.
Yes. Yeah. We are still in outside in Goa actually right now, and few more activities and formalities to complete. So I'm in home right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can understand that.
Thank you.
We'll be looking forward to a lot of inputs from your end, because you were the one who, in fact, rather maker of this particular scheme.
Yeah, but we should not be confining ourselves to any specific scheme. What I think we plan to discuss must be much more open-ended. But yes, it will be useful to discuss some of the important aspects which are covered.
True. So it must be quite cold in Jodhpur as well?
No. I'm not in Jodhpur. I'm in Goa actually, not in Jodhpur right now. Yeah, Jodhpur is pretty cold. Jodhpur yesterday, Mount Abu was -5, as they say, -5, -6.
Good evening, Sancheti sir.
Hello, Namaskar, Chaudhary sir. We haven't met, or did we meet?
Yeah, we met at Pune once, and then we used to meet at MNIT Jaipur long back.
Long back. Okay, fine. Okay.
We have a regular interaction with Punia sir. So he's my guru.
Very nice. Very nice.
From the mechanical only. So Bikaner, I used to get a lot many things there.
Okay. So where are you located now?
I'm in Nasik, sir. I'm with Sandeep University, Nasik.
Okay. Very nice.
Welcome, Dr. Sanghi.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Dheeraj ji. How are
you? Dheeraj.
और संचेती सर कैसे हैं आप?
हाँ साहब, बिल्कुल ठीक है. आप बताइए क्या खबर है, कैसा लग रहा है जयपुर?
जयपुर तो आपका शहर है सर, बहुत बढ़िया शहर है.
नहीं, आपका भी उतना ही है. आप you have had your innings in Jaipur and you have been in places pan India also, so very nice.
From Kanpur to Jaipur, basically. My hometown.
Yes.
One pur to another pur.
Yes, of course. Okay, I think Dr. Honwad is also joining. I was thinking that everybody joins, so maybe we'll take this 5 minutes as a buffer. We also have, most of us are from India. I'm currently not in India, but also we have a friend from Malaysia, Dr. Chin Kwan Ho, my longtime friend from Multimedia University, very prominent university in Malaysia. And we are doing some very good things with them.
Excellent.
So Dr. Honwad is also joining. Without further ado, I'll kickstart today's session. So welcome everyone to World Assessment Council's Educators this week. We have been discussing interesting topics, brainstorming ideas around the future of education. That's what we've been doing in Educators this week in the season 1. In season 2, we kickstarted with something where we talked about blended learning. It was an interesting conversation. We understand the importance of digital, how important it is for institutions to build digital capacities. And today's topic is definitely very dear to my heart and also very dear to a lot of universities, the complexities around it, but it's also a very popular thing among students, which is credits exchange, and typically global credits exchange. Of course, we have been talking about credits exchange nationally. There are some popular credits exchange model and all of that. We'll discuss all of this in today's conversation. How Indian universities or Asian universities, how they can really partner with universities in the US, Europe, Australia, and how we can look beyond STEP programs. I mean, like we have been talking about STEP programs, but is there a way Are there methods in which we can have real collaboration, which could be anything, maybe online, maybe hybrid, maybe in person? But are there ways in which we can actually explore credit transfer as well? And if that credit transfer happens, what exactly would be the way? So with that note, this is our panelists. Some of them were not able to join. Some of them will be joining a little late. We have Professor Sanchiti, esteemed educator from and Vice Chancellor of Marwadi University. Professor Dheeraj Sanghi, Vice Chancellor of JK Lakshmipat University. Professor Sri Hari Honwad, Prakash Honwad is here. He is the Vice Chancellor from Sir Padampat Singhania University. Dr. Chin Kwano, who is the VP International and Digital from Multimedia University, Malaysia. Professor Raghuveer Singh, the Vice Chancellor from Tirthankar Mahavir University. And Dr. Chetan Chaudhary from a very special university, Sandeep University. He's the Registrar and Director of International Affairs. So I'll give you a little credit, special university.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for that.
Okay, so this is broadly the agenda of today's discussion. Since we have lesser number of people, we might wrap up in 60 minutes or 70 minutes. We have divided primarily into 4 quadrants. One is going to be the overview as to what this is, where do we stand today, where does India stand today, where does Malaysia, where does most of the universities stand today. Then we'll talk about the opportunities, like what are exactly the opportunities, why do we literally want to get into this, why is it important? Is it important for all the stakeholders? Is it a win-win? And how is it a win-win and opportunities for everybody involved? Then, of course, we'll discuss the challenges. And then most importantly, in the end, because we are problem solvers, we would try to find what could be done so we can have a greater impact and faster resolution. And we can probably reach faster to a position which probably we are targeting in 5 years or 10 years from now. So with that, we will begin with a little overview. Let me see if I'm not missing anybody. Okay, everybody's here. Of course, we understand that when we talk about academic credit system, every university, every institution, the way education was built, we understand we had to quantify learning. We had to understand how do we measure learning outcomes, and we came up with academic credit system. Typically a standard which is used by universities to measure and assess students' work and effort during their bachelor's, master's, PhD programs, or whatever. Now, this is a very important thing that every university, and this is where a lot of heterogeneity lies in this. We'll talk about different, academic credit systems. Every university is unique because there is autonomy, because countries differ, because cultures differ, because the way you look at education differs, the way we calculate credits also differs. So credit is essentially, a simple record of learning. It may be evaluated on the basis of attendance assessments, workload, hours of study, learning outcomes, and whatnot. And the way we quantify it can really vary from country to country, and of course from university to university as well. Even like, for instance, just in US, I'm like probably 10 universities, if you pick 10 universities, everybody would follow probably a different rule. But yes, there are general guidelines. Most of the countries, they do have some general guiding principles on which they understand how do they define their credits. The scores, the value could differ, but generally the underlying principle remains the same. So we understand it has to be more around, it brings more clarity. There is consistency in the way we evaluate our students and put up a framework around it. Of course, we sort of develop a common currency because collaboration is important. And we have been talking about, these kinds of programs. It's not new. It has been happening over the years for the last couple of decades. So of course, it really sort of gives the flexibility when we look at it as an academic currency. And of course, we can be more creative with our curriculum and our content when we talk about credits and how we can look at transferring it from one university to the other. So primarily, these are the credit systems we see are the most popular. Of course, we talk about American credits, which is more on semester credits and quarter credits. So that may vary. So it's not course dependent. Not every course will give you a 4 or a 5 or a 10 or a 20 credit. It may depend on your semester credit hours or your quarter credit hours. I'm sure everybody understands here how this works. In Europe, what is most popular is ECTS, which is European Credit Transfer and Accumulation System. So any university which is within the European higher education area or an international university, there are conversions, and there is a general guideline for most of the universities in the Europe, which is followed. UK follows an FHEQ, which is like, they also have their own the framework for higher education for qualifications, education qualifications of degree awarding bodies in England. And they also have developed their own credit system, which is pretty homogeneous across UK universities. Similarly, Australian credit system, it is regulated by the Australian qualifications framework. There are a couple of others as well. Australia does follow multiple frameworks as well. So for instance, and every other country, like for instance, in India, I'm sure there are so many professors who will talk about this in India or in Malaysia or in UAE. Every country is working on this, and they're really coming up with ways in which they can actually roll out their credits and look for greater collaboration. So I have this, like for instance, here, we talk about roughly 2 ECTS credits are equivalent to 1 US credits, and roughly 10 UK credits are equivalent to 3 US credits. Of course, because that's why this makes it a little difficult. Because when a student really is looking for doing a course somewhere, there are credit counselors, credit transfer counselors who work with students and explain them how this works. Then of course there are also bodies between universities which really work on it. There are MOUs and there are hundreds of other things, and that makes it a very bureaucratic process. And that's where the biggest hurdle comes. Everybody loves the idea that this should be so seamless, but unfortunately we haven't been able to create a framework which can actually do this. So this is again like a typical understanding of how equivalence and the credit equivalence works. For instance, in Australia, 50 points could be 30 ECTS. In Canada, 1 credit could be equivalent to 2 ECTS. China, 1 credit is 2 ECTS mostly. Hong Kong, 1 credit is equivalent to 1 ECTS. Japan, 1 credit is 2.5 ECTS. Singapore, 0.8 MCS. Now this is a different credit system that Singapore uses. UK, 2 credits is equal to 1 ECTS. USA, we can see it is like quarter credit or semester credit, and it depends. And then of course, so this is how the sort of conversion that happens. Now this can definitely be, and there are a lot of tools, technologies, AI algorithms which have been created, which can really do this conversion quickly and faster. So it's just that you just need to have that algorithm which can really do this faster for you, and this becomes very easy for all stakeholders, including students. Understanding the challenges, we understand where do we have the challenge when you talk about credit transfer system, whether it is nationally between universities within the country or internationally. Of course, credit conversion, because every university or the ecosystem looks at credits in a different way. You define credits differently. You have different weightage when you define your credit. So that's why credit conversion could be a cumbersome process. But yes, so many universities have already found resonance there, and they have been able to roll it out. But yes, this has to be more seamless process. Of course, lack of technology, I think still a very manual process. You will still see people literally carrying this out on Excel sheets in different universities. I've seen that myself. But some of the universities have also literally rolled out credit calculators on the website, and students can actually log in and they can actually see, okay, if I'm doing this course and this program somewhere else, and this on my university or the universities, how many credits does my university give? So of course, slow collaboration again is a big challenge. You really literally have to work with different universities, their MOUs. It's a cumbersome process. If one university has to partner with 20 universities globally, it's a very challenging process. It's very exhaustive for either side. You need to have a team which really works on this. You need to have protocols and signing of documents and all of that. I'm like, still a lot of universities don't really sign on DocuSign. So all of that is very challenging. Of course, so execution of this becomes one of the biggest hurdles. We definitely need to have global regulation. It's still very local in terms of every country. You can really sort of negotiate between one university and the other, or one framework and the other. You literally have to work with different frameworks depending on which country you want to interact with. Bureaucracy definitely makes it difficult, and lack of a true tech-enabled global credits exchange. I mean, like, we still don't have something like, an NYSE. We can literally see what's happening, and these are the credits, where do they stand? And of course, they are also duration specific. So all of that, these are some of the challenges which really make it difficult, when we sort of roll this out. But the thing is, this is something which is high in demand. This is one of the recent surveys which was done with 10,000 respondents from 16 countries. And there are that if you are willing to choose a university, and the university is offering a program which is 100% on their premises, all the courses, all the programs, all the semesters, you have to take it on their university. Or if you are allowed to travel and like an academic free bird, and go to multiple universities and earn credits and come back to your parent university and complete your degree, 86% said yes, this is the kind of program we want. And 14% were not sure about this. But the biggest thing is, every student, this is what they want. This is what gives them academic flexibility. What are the top destinations? UK, US, Canada, Germany, Australia, France, South Korea has really has come up well, Italy, Netherlands, Japan. And this is not for India or Malaysia, this is global. Like, if you pick up students, where do they actually want to go for higher studies? These are the countries that they choose. Of course, in India, you will see some of the country, in India or Malaysia, you'll see some of the countries that they're really keen on. But yes, the intent to have global collaboration is very strong. So some of the opportunities and why this really makes a lot of sense. For students, definitely it is academic flexibility, student mobility, and this is definitely, they love to have custom learning paths. This makes it more democratic, a process which gives them more flexibility to choose what they want. And global exposure is something which is very important. Maybe a student is willing to pursue a program in a university abroad, but because it is very expensive, maybe the program is out of reach. But if the student is able to do just one course somewhere, wherever they want, during summers or winters, which also helps them earn credits back in their parent university, that is literally phenomenal. And of course, for institutions, this really makes a lot of sense because it helps them strengthening their academic curriculum, help them build truly global programs. And of course, it really helps them literally on attracting better students. And most importantly, it also helps them enhance revenues, because for all these global programs, there is a premium they can charge compared to the regular program. So this is definitely something which institutions look for. They have big teams working on things like this, but it's still an age-old process. There is innovation happening, but I think there is still huge scope in terms of making it a very seamless process on an international level. So with this note, I invite everyone to be a part of this conversation, and let's figure out and let's understand first, what are the opportunities? Why is international credit transfer important? Are universities looking for it? And if they are, why is it important? And what are the opportunities? Where do they lie? We'll start with Professor Sancheti.
Thank you, Saurabh. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. First of all, thank you for arranging this interaction, which is on a very, very important subject of credit exchanges, or it also leads to many other forms of collaboration and diversity and student centricity, etc., whatever we can think. But I must say that your presentation has said it all. You've mostly covered most of the important aspects of whatever was to be said by me, I would say, or maybe broadly what is required in this framework. So we know that for ages this has been happening, and it will continue to grow. It will happen because the world is shrinking. It's becoming global village, or is already is. And one would like to have the flavor of learning from different parts of the world, for the simple reason that your work domain would be now purely international. It's not necessary that you're confined to your state or your country. It will be global now, and that is the reason why people can do it. The second thing I would say is the expansion of the knowledge. There might be certain pockets sitting in certain parts of the world where they are strong and the other parts would be having other. And therefore, if you need to learn about each other, then obviously these exchanges are very important. So in India, if I say particularly, this has been happening for quite some time as far as known to me, but mainly in top-notch institutions. We didn't have possibly a framework to do so. We probably didn't have understanding to do so. Or maybe we didn't have clear-cut regulations to either support it or to stop it. It was all a mixed mode. It was in flux. And therefore, some people who could challenge the rut probably took plunge and did something, but others were simply stopped from attempting something of this particular nature. And this is true both for government and the private institutions. But fortunately, the need has been understood. The importance has been understood. So now everyone is trying to work towards that. And particularly with the advent of new education policy, also with the opening of learning in different ways, particularly in blended ways from anywhere in the world, from any expert in the world at any time. I think people are accepting now that I can do credits from US or Japan or UK, and then still it should be countable because I'm studying that subject from the best of the teacher. And online, offline, and everything is getting mixed up now. They are not necessarily isolated from each other as far as the teaching learning is concerned. One may have their preferences is a different thing, but they remain to be the same. So all it basically needs is how do we make a free-flowing structure for doing a degree program or teaching learning or whatever it may be. And in that context, in India, we have NEP supported activity called as ABC, Academic Bank of Credit. And this is a prime scheme which we have coined, yet to take shape in terms of implementation, but it dwells on many important aspects of what you call the credit exchanges. But it is with one limitation, and the major limitation is it is right now confining itself to India. It's not necessarily talking about international setup to be covered. That's one limitation. The second limitation is because in India, the expansion is huge, number of institutions are huge, and therefore there is a challenge that some of them are very good and some of them are not good, so good. And therefore, there was a challenge that if people from ordinary or not so good institutions bring their credits to good institutions, how to control or counter it. So there have been some regulations which have been proposed that credits can be transferred easily from a high-ranked institution to not necessarily so highly ranked, but the reverse may not be true. Similarly, there have been limits on the credit transfers, how much credits can be transferred, but that would be defined by the parent institution or organization which is going to award a degree. Likewise, so it can be 30, 40, 50%. They may also, while doing so in credits, let's say for an engineering degree, say that we will need you to complete your major project or maybe your seminar or your internship with us. The rest of the credits can be divided in a certain way across the globe or maybe across Indian institutions like that. So there will be a lot of academic freedom for this, which will be given to the academic institutions themselves and subsequently to the students themselves, and teachers also comes in between. So it is a mechanism where you can say the autonomy of doing what you want to do in academic domain percolates down to the lowest level, and that is the level of the student, which in Indian context was relatively very, very poor or just not there. Even in the context of teachers, it was not there. So it's an opening up of some kind of a floodgates. But when it comes to mechanism of delivering it, I think government has thought about it because they have created a body or they have created a setup, which is a National Academic Depository-like body, which will be controlled by a very reliable agency where you can deposit the credits, where you can accumulate the credits, where you can transfer the credit, or where you can exchange the credit. So there will be a mechanism by which institutions can become member, and then, or maybe they are made eligible to become member, and then they themselves choose whether they want to be member or not. And likewise, it happens. So credits can be deposited only by the authentic agencies or approved universities or the partner institutions for the ABC kind of a scheme. So that's a platform. I think that's what you have developed, CredX, as a platform for an international domain where it can be more free flowing. One I'm talking to you is about the government of India setup, which is there. And similarly, there are many other things which we are still talking about. We have not resolved fully. You gave a very good input in terms of how the credits are being mapped from US to Japanese system to European to Australian or whatever those are. I don't think so in India we have done such a mapping, primarily because we ourselves do not have a very standard system, and therefore we cannot prescribe a mapping which is there. I know some of the IITs follow a very different credit system compared to some of the conventional ones. However, in Indian model, we have a very simple saying that one credit would be earned by if you have 1 hour per week of an engagement. So if you have a course which is requiring 4 hours of an engagement per week, then it can be given 4 credits. Broadly, it is something like this. There are some other smaller distortions which are there for that. So that's the Indian definition of the credit. How it matches with the rest of the world is beyond me right now, and I'm sure CredX will give us more inputs on that, or other experts will talk about that. And then, of course, there are many other challenges which are associated with this, that how do you take the credits of skilling? How do you take the credits basically, which may be on vocational side or something of that nature, are not yet fully defined. So I'm sure this deliberation and maybe what is happening at the Government of India level will pave way for better understanding of that and better knowledge, not only to the students, but also to the teachers and also to the institution and the heads of the institution, including me, who are sitting here and discussing this issue, should know more about what the credit exchange is. But it is clearly the need of the hour, and I'm sure it will be taken up in a big way. One thing which probably in Indian context, some of the institutions will not be very comfortable with it is that some of the ordinary institutions will tend to lose business, in the sense they will have lesser enrollment because the students would like wherever possible to go to good institutions or reputed institution, and therefore they may face some challenge or feel some heat out of that. But I certainly hope that those will be overcome, because ultimately all the customers, all the students want, what they want is the quality and good degrees, and degrees which are more purposeful. So hopefully this effort will bring a lot of newness, fresh energy, fresh ideas and exchanges across the domain. This is my expectation, but let's hear to from other experts, and then let's discuss what are the other challenges. So thank you so much, Saurav.
Absolutely, sir. It's wonderful ideas, a lot of good things that you've put. I was just remembering that in UK, what they follow, like you said, in India, 1 hour is basically equivalent to 1 credit. In UK, it's like 10 hours is basically 1 credit. So of course, that's what it is. I mean, like the way you define, and I think if India hasn't really come up with basically a framework, if let's say IITs have developed it, or if some primary institutions have developed it, I think it's good that we have some sort of a homogeneous model. Of course, there could be a lot of autonomy in that as well, because the way you deliver definitely changes the way you roll it out. It's just how you count your learning outcomes. So with that note, Professor Raghuveer Singh, I would like to bring you in this conversation. What do you think are your thoughts, sir? And why is it difficult, or is it easy? And where are the opportunities, first of all? We'll talk about the challenges later. What are the opportunities here? I think you're muted, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Saurav. Thank you. Professor Sancheti has already given you a complete story on ABC. And he has clearly stated that that's, the national education policy of 2020 has in fact changed a lot of things. A lot of flexibility, which we never heard in the past, has been taken care. And this ABC has perfectly taken care of flexibility, multidisciplinary, multi-entry, and multi-exit, and all those issues which we were discussing about national education policy has been taken care. We, as an here, and the UP government has come up with the UP ABC, and that's nothing much different from what UGC has suggested. It's more of a replica of the same, except the validity of credit earned has been increased from 7 years to 10 years. Very minor changes. Of course, there is a framework. Now, when you say the opportunity, see, India being a vast country with a lot of diversity, as of now, I see a lot of problems when you implement this. A lot of problems. See, the understanding will be a big problem, not only at the level of the student, but at the teachers sitting in a remote place. You may not have a large number of students even opting for this scheme to begin with. So since it is an evolution, it's difficult how beneficial this would be and what kind of challenges we would face in the future. Whether the institutions as such would have that kind of a cafeteria system placed in their academic environment, or it's so well envisaged that one can develop a bespoke program. That means one can adapt those courses and develop a program, right? Even the ABC has said, even if you have not graduating for any specific discipline and you have completed the number of credits to be required to be, for a particular degree, you could be awarded a degree in liberal arts. So that is the kind of freedom it talks about for a student. Now, we have been having a lot of, as Professor Sancheti already pointed, a lot of exchange programs with foreign universities. And these exchange programs has been very simple. Whatever you mentioned, the European credit system, Australian credit system, I think this is something new with most of us, the way they calculate their credits. Our system is very simple. You have a semester of so many weeks, say 13 to 15 weeks generally, and every week you have number of hours for a given course. That becomes a credit system. So it's nothing complex in our way. But equating with all those foreign countries where you mentioned those around 8 to 10 countries which generally Indian students go to, it'll be a complexity for us to start with, and hope technology, as you discussed, would facilitate us to understand this. The only thing which I foresee today is the cost. Cost might prevent the large proportion or large volume as of now. So I see for last 6 to 7 months, a lot of people have been approaching us, to do an online courses. But as pointed out by Professor Sancheti, nothing has been talked about foreign university credit recognition in our ABC system. It has not been. It's purely for Indian universities. And of course, the riders have been given. That's, we all know. Yes, it's evolution. It will take time for us to first understand how we are doing at our own and then proceed beyond the shores of our country. That's my take.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. But I'm a little intrigued here. We have been talking about student exchange programs, and we have students going from one university to a foreign university. And when we go there, we take up courses. So how are those credits being transferred, or are they simply vocational and those credits don't get transferred? How does student exchange program or international exchange program works in that case?
No, see, there are no regulations, no guidelines from UGC, etc. So people do it their own way.
Okay.
Whatever the two, feel like doing, they do it. So there is no framework available as such. Already pointed out by Professor Sancheti, there is no framework. So we can't comment on what others do, but there is a lack of framework on this aspect. Or commonality is not there, let's say this.
Okay, so I think one of the biggest thing which is lacking in our academic credit system is sort of homogeneity, a protocol, a framework, which basically is followed by everyone and which is also in sync with what other universities globally are doing in different countries. With that note, I would like to come to Professor Sanghi. I would like to understand, first of all, I understand so you're from JKLU now, but considering IIT Kanpur's perspective here, like how does STEP exchange program work there? And I wanted to go somewhere when I was at IIT Kanpur, but I couldn't. So if let's say we pursue 4 courses somewhere outside as a part of the STEP exchange, as a STEP program, does IIT Kanpur accept those credits and how does it work?
Yeah, so IIT Kanpur has been accepting credits from other universities for at least, I think, 20 years. In fact, I was the one who wrote the proposal for this about 20 years ago. And I think what we are discussing here today is unnecessarily complex situation. The way IIT Kanpur operates and the same way we operate in JKLU is much, much simpler because the complexity is somewhere else. Complexity is not in credit transfer. Okay. Where is the complexity? The complexity is you have done a course of computer networks in IIT Kanpur. Now you go somewhere else and you do a course titled communication network. Right? Do I give you credit for it? It will depend on whether this is the replica of the course that you have done.
Absolutely.
Right? If there is an overlap between the course that you have done here in the, the 80% overlap, I don't want to give you credit. It's the same course you have repeated. So the complexity is the courses that you have done, whether I want to even recognize them or not. And that, at least as of today, will have to be done manually. We will have to ask you what is the curriculum of those courses, and we'll have to check with our curriculum, right? So credit transfer is the least of a problem. The way IIT Kanpur operates is, it will say, look, once we have decided that these are the courses that we do want to give you credit for, now you tell me how many lectures, how many tutorials, how many labs, how much effort, etc., etc. And we will do a manual mapping of those credits to our system. If you are, if our credit systems match roughly, then we'll give the same credit as you've got there. If the credit systems are different, there'll be a manual conversion from that system to this system. And I don't think that conversion is very difficult. I mean, we have handled, dozens of students going out every semester, and it is routinely done, right? So same thing we do in JKLU. Almost every semester, 10% of my undergraduate batch is going out. Okay.
Wonderful.
And of course, they are going out mostly to Indian universities, only, so mostly IITs and the IIITs. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But some people are going abroad as well. And it's the same principle we apply
So
to
the
them.
students are earning those credits from IITs?
Yes. So my JKLU students are going to IITs, earning those credits, and I give them credits here. Now, what we say is, look, I'm going to give you credit. It doesn't mean I'm going to count that for your CGP.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is one huge challenge in Indian universities. You want to count everything in CGPA, and you want to convert their grades to our grades.
True.
That is a very complex issue, and I don't think one should ever try that. So what I do is, so my 10 students this time are in IIT Gandhinagar, for example, right? They will come back and I will say, okay, these are the 4 courses you did there. These are 4 credits each. I'm going to give you 4 credits each because roughly the credit system is similar. But on my transcript, I will just say they passed these 4 courses. They will not be counted in CGP. Okay. So that's, the grades are the complex thing that I've solved by saying I'm not going to give you grades.
Correct.
It's a very simple system. I mean, I don't know where is the complexity. The other thing that I tell my students, so for example, this time a student has gone to Amsterdam, or another student has gone to Minnesota, another student has gone to Florida. Now there I will tell them, look, you may think that what effort you have put in and the equivalence should be, let's say, 16 credits. Maybe my faculty, when he looks at it, he may say, no, 16 nahi hai, 14 hai. Right? Don't worry about it. Exact computation doesn't matter because the advantage of going out and seeing the world is so huge that if the conversion, you miss out on 1 or 2 credits, you think it should be X and I'm giving you Y, it doesn't matter because the advantage is just so huge. And my students agree with that. 1 or 2 credits, I will give you an extra credit here for something else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think the challenge that we have really is just to say whether this course deserves credit. Does this course have significant overlap with my course that you have already done?
Correct.
That's the only challenge I face. There is no other challenge. And of course, going abroad is a cost issue. So therefore, few students go abroad. Most of the students go within India. And if there are vice chancellors here who want to have student exchange program with us, we'd be happy to do that.
Wonderful. So I think, I'll be happy to catalyze some of those conversations here if that can happen here. But so there's a question that really comes to my mind. So I understand that right now, the way it is being done, it's a very manual process. And of course, one of the biggest challenges that are there are definitely, are your credits or your courses and my course, are you actually doing the same amount of work or the same kind of content that you should have been doing in my course? But so if there is, and I think it's a very simple process, there could be an algorithm which can literally figure out, let's say I as a student, I want to do a course in networking, and that's the next course in my parent university. I simply, and there is a system, and I can literally find out the content of my course, and it is automatically mapped through an algorithm, through the content and the syllabus of some other course with whichever universities, and I can literally find there's a 95% mapping. So if there is 95%, 90% mapping, I think, then it's sort of a match. And when that match happens, then of course the credit transfer and the equivalence of credits, again, that can be done through AI, because these are not very complex. I mean, like, we have built complex systems. I mean, like, we hardly have 20, 30, 40, 50 frameworks to follow. And I think, an algorithm can be created which can literally figure out and make the life easy. I mean, like, right now, even if IT Kanpur is doing such manual work, this can literally be overwritten, overdone by a simple algorithm, which can be really made better with, with more and more data.
Saurabh, I'll tell you at IIT Kanpur what happens is that students have gone to some standard 10, 15, 20 universities, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people go to NUS, for example. We understand NUS system, right? So first student, when he went to an NUS, we will study their credit system and we will say their 5 credits are equal to 4 credits here or whatever it is, right? The next time a student goes to NUS, yeah, we already know the conversion. That conversion doesn't need to be repeated, right? So the credit conversion to me is a very simple process, because it needs to be done, even if it needs to be done manually, it needs to be done only once for a university, unless that university changes its credit system. And my students aren't going to 20 different new universities every year. Okay. Typically, every college gets, a culture that, our students are going to go to these 5, 10, 15, 20 places every year. Right. So the credit conversion part is a simple part. To me, if AI exists that can say these 2 courses are equivalent, or these 2 courses have huge overlap, or these 2 courses don't have overlap, to me, that's the challenge. And if that can be solved by technology, I'll be very happy.
That can 100% be solved. I mean, like, we have resume mapping, of course, content mapping is a very simple thing. Okay, coming down to the next portion, which according to Dr. Sanghi is not a big challenge, which is like credit transfers. Coming to you, Dr. Ho, and trying to understand what happens in Malaysia. Of course, you can give us a little overview how your university, now Malaysian universities in general, look at international collaboration, which universities, which countries do you really work with? And also the question that I want to understand, is there a challenge in credit transfer? I mean, like, are we really looking at a manual thing, a lot of manual collaboration back and forth, or do we really aim at having some sort of maybe a blockchain wherein these credentials can be transferred and it becomes a very easy and automated process? Your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting that we are discussing credits. In the Malaysian context, universities look at credits from 2 angles. The first is, of course, what we understand credits for what they are, which is the quantification of learning, if I may say, in terms of typically the duration, right? So that is how we understand credits. And secondly, what is important is that the credit is actually a basis for charging students tuition fees. So that is one of the key things which is relevant in the Malaysian context. And my second point is that in Malaysia, our qualifications agency has established a very a framework for our credits, right? So in Malaysia, if you talk about one credit is equivalent to a 40 notional hours of study, right? So what do these hours cover? They cover everything, right? They cover your contact hours in class, right? Spends 42 hours in class, so that 42 hours is part of the credit. any time outside of the class that the students spend to prepare for the classes, to prepare for assessment, to prepare for assignments, the time the students use to, to prepare for exams or to do their projects and assignments, those hours are counted into the credits. So if you look at a typical course or subject in Malaysia, it is typically 3 credits. So within a semester of 14 weeks, we will expect that a student will actually spend about 120 hours, both in class and out of class, for that particular subject. So that is very much well established. So in terms of the credit exchange, in Malaysia we don't have any issue. For example, we know how exactly to map to ECTS. We know how to map exactly to the US credits and so on, because we have that established credit system. But having said that, I mean, going to your questions on what are the challenges, I can appreciate what Professor Sanghi was mentioning just now. I think the issue really is, if I receive a lot of, I send out a lot of students to many parts of the world, to Korea, some even went to India. So the question is, when these students come back, so we understand how the credits are calculated, but the typical issue is that, number one, do the syllabus cover each other? Well, if the 2 syllabus are, they correspond, but that's all well and good. But the second question is, if a student actually brings back the credit from another university, would the students be able to demonstrate the same learning outcomes as what we would like in MMU? So I think that is actually a bigger question, a question that is difficult to answer. Because we find that sometimes students transferring credits in, they may not exhibit the same skills or competency that we would have them achieve in our program. So that is one of the key challenges. So our challenge is actually it's not about mapping credits or computing credit. It's actually to ascertain whether learning outcomes are achieved. Syllabus may be the same, right? Course content may be the same, but the learning outcomes may be different. So this is one of the key challenge that we face, and we get a lot of comments often that students who are transferring in, the teachers are complaining that they have, even though they transfer the credit, they may not have achieved that level of competency that is required for the following course. So that's the first challenge, right? The second challenge is that, as you know, in Malaysia itself, this is happening all over the world as well. Students are actually taking micro-credentials from many places, right? They're taking micro-credentials from universities, they're taking micro-credentials from training companies all over the place. So there lies another challenge, right? How do we actually assess 2 things? One, the credit value of a micro-credential, who may not, that micro-credential may not be from an accredited program. It may be from just a training company. It may be from if a student takes a Cisco certification, it comes with so how do we actually assess that and accept that as a credit in Malaysia, our qualification systems actually allow that. So this is another challenge which is ahead of us, and it's a real challenge because we are going for flexibility, right?
That's
the
wonderful.
third thing in my mind is that the credit system is actually to make it easier for the university to operate, but it doesn't really help the student, because if you say that if you put 10 students together in a 3 credit course, you assume that they will take the same time to achieve the same learning outcomes. We know that some students are different. Some smarter ones, they can achieve the learning outcomes much faster, right? So that credit value actually sort of does not really reflect the true ability of the students, but it is an established system, may be difficult to change. So that is that is my view. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, I think there's some very valid points. One, I understand. So we discovered something that one, of course, the biggest challenge is that if the syllabi matches, if the syllabus is same, if the content is pretty much the same, there is some sort of synergy. Now, of course, even after that, we are looking at rubrics and the learning outcomes, and are the students able to produce similar learning outcomes which they would have produced otherwise in the parent university? So I think, if we sort of do a match, because this is, I think, it's now more of a matchmaking between 2 courses, because now it cannot be a blanket partnership. Like, for instance, MMU University cannot really partner with a Marwadi University or with a JKLU India in a blanket fashion for all courses. It has to be literally broken down to every program, to every course. And in every course, we really need to figure out, and if there is technology which can really figure this out, that, okay, the way we approach our content, the way we approach our rubrics, the way we approach our learning outcomes, if they are mapped. And I think, there is something which really now comes to my mind. Are we also considering online courses? Like you said that, there are, courses and coursework which is done by non-accredited bodies as well. Like, for instance, I have an example like UNT in the US, they've started giving 12 credits to a course which is done in Google. Like you talked about Cisco. So if, let's say, a student is doing a networking course in Cisco, will the university impart them 4, 5, 6 credits, whatever it is worth? So I think that's also very important when we talk about. So I think that autonomy for universities to really pick and award credits, because I think that's what differentiates a visionary university with the regular ones. So with that note, I would move to Dr. Hodward. Dr. Hodward, so what do you think? I'm like, when we are actually talking about exchange of credits, should online course, because now we're talking about online courses. So let's say tomorrow a student does a course somewhere on Coursera. Will your university consider that?
A very interesting question. In fact, our university has considered that, particularly during the pandemic. The UGC also has been insisting on making sure that the SWAYAM courses are accepted. And we have had deliberations even in our academic council. And what we have come up with is the student with prior permission can join a SWAYAM course. SWAYAM is what is universally recognized. Coursera is something which also we are considering, but then we are a little skeptical about it at present, because there is also money to be paid for these courses. So there is a question which students will raise: I have paid the tuition fees to you, who will pay the money for a Coursera course? So we are yet to cross that bridge.
So let's say forget about Coursera. Let's say a
SWAYAM course or a similar course which is say offered from MIT, for example, an online course. Purdue has got a system of offering online courses, and if the student wants to do that, it has to be with prior permission. And I would say here that we have come up with the 2 suggestions which we have seen in this debate. What Professor Sanghi said about the content, and what Professor Ho said is about the outcomes. And we have tried to do that mapping before the student goes and does that course. He should have a mapping, and corresponding to that mapping, rather than credit transfer, the first thing that should happen is he is to be exempted from doing one of our courses. That is what is relevant. So that exemption is in lieu of doing the course on campus. He is doing this course either online, or if we say, like Professor Sanghi said, if he wants to go and do it in IIT or do it in this thing, some of the students do want to go abroad on a summer term, and if they find a course is accessible to them in a university with whatever payment of fees, if he takes prior permission, I'm sure corresponding exemption is what can be awarded. And I agree with Professor Sanghi, instead of trying to convert credits and give a CGPA, it is safer to exempt the students from doing those credits and accept the transcript awarded by the corresponding university with its own credit, this thing. So as a result, the exempted credits is what we seem to have awarded him, and that exempted credit is what you have to see to it. And of a degree, and as long as he is within that range and has completed the minimum required credits, because there is further breakup of how many sciences credits he should do, how many core basic engineering credits if you do, core engineering, elective, and humanities. Has attained all those norms. Today, we seem to have solved that problem in our own way by giving exemptions. Only in cases, for example, some of the SWAYAM courses have students appearing for an examination, and these examinations are conducted by IIT professors. These are live courses where they do it in a group across the country, and there we believe that if the student is getting an advantage in terms of an enhancement in his CGPA, we must give him that advantage because he has actually competed in an IIT offered course, which let's accept that is one of our premier institutions and would have much better outcome orientation as well as the content this thing the true coverage of content, if you want me to phrase such as like that. So it's at that point where we are. But I think as we go along, these things will evolve specifically. For example, the definition of credits, what Professor Sancheti said is correct, and it's practically across India. I think everybody follows that. 1 hour, 1 lecture per week is 1 credit, and it fits well with what Professor Ho said. He says 42 hours. It is believed that for every lecture which you take, the student, needs about 3 hours. Smarter students need less, but an average student should put in another 3 hours to, convert that lecture into his own internalized understanding and this thing. So it's more or less very similar in terms of understanding. And we can say that if the student contact hours are non-existent, we should say for every credit, the students needs to spend anywhere between 20 to 25 hours of his own hard work. And we really, and I think that's what most of us follow, even while designing. For example, in MTech credits, the number of hours the student really needs to put in has to be much work he needs to put in has to be much higher than the BTech student, and so on.
Correct. I think some very valid
points. This is where we stand for online courses. Coursera also, I'm sure there are some popular courses, like people gave an example of Google course. I don't think we have explored Google courses because we are not sure whether it's UGC. I mean, we would be rubbing the UGC in the wrong way in case you do. And particularly since you are controlled by UGC, AICTE, multiple regulatory bodies, one has to be very careful. In fact, this entire credit exchange has become relevant to India because our regulators have looked down upon the joint programs which were built by taking into account everything that Dr. Sangeet and Professor Ho and Dr. Sancheti identified in the beginning. And 2 universities, jointly designed the program and run it and offer a joint degree, which partly is done in India, partly abroad, or with student exchange and things like that. And the same program is run in both the universities. I think regulators have had several misgivings about that, and then there is a need for a good NAC accreditation grade, etc., for that to be recognized. I'm sure the credit exchange is a much simpler and bypassing regulatory hurdles. That student goes, studies in a good university, comes back, you accept that he has learned and then award him that degree.
Correct, sir. I think, there's some very valid points made here. Of course, we also need, when we talk about credits, we also talk about exemption. I mean, like, does that happen? Do we really need to care about an actual transfer of credit? Because sometimes you can also consider an equivalence and impart it yourself and, suffice a few credits here and there for the candidate. But I think, what mostly we're missing is a strong intent. I see that, even when, universities have autonomy, but still we are really governed by a body, and that body doesn't have really clear guidelines on something like this. So if universities can play a little bold, can be a little more adventurous, understand how global collaboration may literally happen, and find a way around the current ecosystem, they can literally, roll out programs which are global, which really have this kinds of exchange of students. Yeah, you have some point to make, sir?
Yeah, on that same point, what you are trying to tell now, even today, I'm sure if there is an understanding between two universities, an odd course can be accepted and it's approved by academic council for exchange or exemption. I think those are the things which are happening even today in many universities, including mine.
Okay, wonderful, sir. Now coming to Dr. Chaudhary, beautiful background. Sir, how does Sandeep University look at it? What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Saurabh. One of the biggest credit transfer, if you look for opportunities, what we talk of is the attracting top talents across the globe or inside the. So the biggest challenge, what I feel inside the system, Indian system, is the transfer of credit. So there is no specific frame out that has been done. How many credits can be transferred from one university to the other? The other question that arises is the equivalence, what we talk of, the credit transfer quantum is there and the equivalence is there. So these two are the major challenges we look forward to it. So across. Now, if we talk of the universities taking their students to build a skill development program, that what is major focus. And we appreciate that, like in the education system, we talk of OBE, outcome-based education. So this is the factor where we want to expose our talent to the international and the global level if it looks forward to it. So it is rightly said, like we don't have the policies to transfer the credits in the system. We have got a predefined system of a course curriculum design. And whatever we do with the global universities across maybe one semester or a 1-year program, that has to be predefined, like it should be, it is known as an audit course, or we can define it as maybe a value-added program. So that accumulation of credit, what is earned, is not been calculated in the CGPA. So this is just a factor of doing the skill development and the latest technological development across the globe and having a knowledge to build a better nation. So this is the major focus on this. Other way around, if we talk of NEP 2020, they normally says now we are into the system where we are focusing on the choice-based credit system. Now, initial what we believe is like currently we are into the focus of transferring of credits. If we focus, like if we are going to implement this choice-based credit system, we should have a flexibility. The student can choose X credit from this semester across the globe, or from the online mode, or maybe from the other multidiscipline. So this is the focus where we are also focused on doing this, and we practice many things where we have a course curriculum design where we identify the students as an advanced learner, and the total number of minimum credits he wants to earn, that is completed a semester ahead, so that he get an extra skill, extra technological development, where across the globe or within the India, maybe online, maybe offline mode. So this is the major challenges we face. Like we talk of the potential of collaboration, we look forward to it, but there is no such clarity like earning of credits, transfer of credits. These are terminologies are like broad, very broad classifications where we are not able to implement it on our curriculum design and development. So I believe this is a factor where this some sort of parameters has to be decided. Flexibility has to be given where we can have student can opt for a choice-based credit system or a one semester abroad, maybe some courses like with the industrial certification with the IBM, Cisco, upgrad. So these type of extra skill development ventures has to be incorporated, and we have to accept this credit, and the calculation has to be included in the CGPA to work on. So that will be because few of the students like think, okay, if my CGPA will not work out with this, so why should I do, or some additional cost has been put into it. So I believe like these initial parameters.
What's stopping universities like Sandeep University or others to accept those credits? Like you are saying that those
credit means we don't have a framework to work on.
Okay.
If his students go abroad for a 6 months training, so we tell him like a project, and he goes there, get a certification from the US.
This framework that you're talking about, will it be developed indigenously by your university, or are you looking at bodies like UGC or others to create a framework for other universities in India?
Yeah, definitely. Their flexibility is here. The exchange programs, what the 1 semester or 1 year is not acceptable at current scenario. So we don't have any guidelines and regulation that regulates this. Okay, this number of credits if students go, you can accumulate into the CGPA and do. So this is just like we are putting our students for the skill developments as an audit course or a value-added program.
I get that.
So that is the challenge we have. If we talk of UGC says 30% of the course curriculum should be shifted to the online mode. What sir says, like we have a system where we put one course, regular course, offline course, we put a basket there of 3 online courses. We do that. Either it can be SWAYAM, it can be from MOOC, it can be from NPTEL, it can be from the MIT. We suggest them that out of these three courses, this regular course will be dropped out and you do online course. So this is a focus, we are doing it. But the actual implementation of these to benefit the students is still not in the phase to be worked on. So these are the challenges where I feel like Association of Indian Universities should come together with the universities and frame out some policies with the government so that internationally across the globe, we are able to put this platform and all the two-way communication, like people from other countries can come to the India and have their technological development, and the students from India can go abroad and work on the parameters what they are looking out for. So this is what we do at Sandeep University.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Before I move to Dr. Sayali Gankar, I have one question, sir, which again I'm a little intrigued on this. Is it possible that what Dr. Chaudhary was talking about, that we need to create a framework, we need to understand how it works, like Dr. Sanghi is doing in a way, and they're doing it at the university. Is it that we literally need a body like UGC to create it for us, or universities have the autonomy to create it and follow it? And where exactly can UGC create a hurdle? I'm talking about Indian universities. Dr. Sanghi or Dr. Sancheti can take this.
I will ask Dr. Sancheti to take it, but I just wanted to make a very brief point about what Dr. Chaudhary just said in terms of counting in CGPA. Now at JKLU, I've been involved with them for the last 4 years. Before that, they actually used to do this grade transfer to CGPA, and very, very few people will go to other universities. There was a fear that if I go to IIT, here I'm an A grade student, in IIT I may get a B grade and my CGPA will go down. So we actually removed this thing, and it has made, of course, our process is absolutely simple now because we don't have to worry about grade transfer. And lots of students are now willing to go to IITs and IITs because this fear that my CGPA will go down is over, right? So our students actually demanded that the grades should not be computed in part of CGPA.
So how do you consider that? So let's say a student goes to an IIT and gets a C. What will you transfer it to at JKLU?
We will give him pass-fail. So we say the credits are counted, but there is no grade counted. So this course will not be counted towards CGPA.
Okay.
So on the transcript, we'll simply say this course was done at IIT Gandhinagar.
Okay.
Saurabh, I'll just say.
Yes, sir.
Like in our structure, we have something called audit course. So anybody does this kind of courses, we give a credit there in the audit course. Similarly, for online courses, we have in our structure a student need to do 2 online courses. So the credits are given in the structure. Online courses are decided depending upon SWAM or NPTEL, whatever are on offer in that particular semester. We draw a list of those courses and then float it among students. Whoever chooses, we approve it from the university. That's it.
Okay. Fair enough. Sanjay sir.
Yeah, so I will add some of the other points in my answer, and probably I'll have to make an exit after that for some reasons. But I think expecting some big body to do it is now more or less impossible because of the dimensions of the higher education in the country. And that is why the autonomy is being given in a big way, and particularly so the academic autonomy. By the way, there was a mention of AIU. So I must say that the AIU came into existence much before UGC, primarily for these reasons, that the institutions, which were very few in number at that time, could talk to each other and could respect each other and could value each other's degrees and programs and courses. So the basis was the same, is what we are discussing. The credit exchange will happen between us and Sandeep University only if we respect each other. We understand that we are sitting at an appropriate level. So that is where AIU was there. But to do so, that for every course, someone will put a slip or application saying, is my course equivalent to an IIT course of this, or an NIT course of this, or an IIM course of this? They cannot do that. I must just give you an example. While I understand that 4 can be equal to 6 and 6 can be equal to 5 is a math, once done, probably can be replicated. But what is not easy is that I had a student 1.5 years back going from SRM, a very bright student, landed up in Berkeley and ended up doing courses on 20th century science. And he was an electronics engineering student. Then he did another course on scientific writing. Another course which he did was quantum theory or advanced quantum theory. Obviously, the guy came back very charged, and he had a touch with one Nobel laureate, and he had something else. He's in a very high orbit now. After graduating, he's more or less completing his post-graduation also from UK, and now he's probably landing in Harvard or somewhere. The point I'm trying to make to you is, when he came back, my equivalence committee, which is what you call manual process, was at complete loss. What do we do with this guy? Where is the question of mapping the courses here? Because that's what he got, and that's why he had gone there, that he wanted to do something different. Fortunately for us, some of the courses could be mapped because of my intervention, but some of the courses which were mandated as a compulsory course for awarding degree was done by him as an additional course in the later semesters, whenever, let's say it was third year, second semester. So fourth year, first semester, he took extra courses and covered. So there are challenges, and these cannot be done by UGCs and AIUs or anyone for that matter. And that's why academic autonomy will be important. By the way, while the discussion was on, I got a message on WhatsApp that UGC has relaxed the condition of A++ institution or C institution or D institution as per the NAC accreditation. It will be free flowing. The notification sent to me just now tells me that it is probably on this Wednesday this was announced, and it is being sent by UGC. Right now, UGC is calling shots because that's the way it is working in terms of regulatory model. But ultimately, UGC is also saying that you are autonomous. But most of us do not want to enjoy that or do not understand the dynamics of that. Doing and not giving credit or CGPA calculation is an obvious thing, because some of them will come with 4-point scale, some of them will come with 7-point scale, some with this. The batch sizes are different, the level of comparisons are different, so it should not be counted. And we broadly call it as an audit course. You have done a course, you have cleared it, we call it audit, it's reflected on your this thing. I would still see the numbers are pretty small right now, whichever institution may be. Some smaller institutions possibly may have in percentage terms larger things,
but otherwise in larger institutions, percentage-wise, it's very, very small. And we are not necessarily talking about this scheme purely for engineering or some high-end professional courses. What happens to BA BCom? SRM, I had 50,000 plus students. Imagine 10% of them going and doing all sorts of courses. They'll not be limited to any. They'll be covering all institutions in the country and possibly outside also. How do I match and map them? I think we need technology. We need a system to do something of some basic things, and rest could be discretionary. Doing it in a priori. Suppose I'm going to Berkeley and you tell me, Professor Sandeep Sancheti, if you're going, do this communication network course and then only it will be counted, I think will kill the very purpose of me going to that place. And I must also tell you that I used to send 20 students to Berkeley on something, expecting that they'll do a design course. By the time they land and register and do formalities, they find the design course is already taken. Hardly 4 or 5 of them are getting, and others are to do other alternative courses. So we cannot really fix. It's something like that, going to a restaurant or going to this, and I know from a la carte that everything which I will order will come my way. They can also refuse, saying, sorry, it's not on offer this semester or this year or today. So there will be plenty of challenges, but then we are meant for solving those challenges. If those challenges are not there, the vice chancellors will cease to exist. The system will run by itself, which is what we don't want. So you keep throwing the problems, we'll keep throwing the solutions, and I'm sure the world will continue like that. But it is more about the novelty, it is more about the diversity, it is more about the satisfaction. And by the way, if you want to talk about that such experiments, 10 years back, University of Delhi and Jamia Millia University experimented with one concept called Meta University concept. And Meta is now a famous word, you know. Yep. And this Meta University concept was purely based on credit exchange between the two. I could have taken a degree from DU, or I could have taken the degree from JMU, and I would have done some courses from DU and some from JMU with the credit transfer happening. But at that time, for whatever reason, it was people pounced upon them on their model, and it didn't work for I would say for wrong reasons. It was killed. But today the same thing is being welcomed now. So the world is changing. We will keep evolving with that, and more organizations and institutions will come into play to facilitate this very diverse framework. And I'm sure this will happen in the interest of everyone. That's my final word here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we still have 10, 12 minutes to go. So yes, of course, with technology, a lot of things will change. In fact, we have been also working on something. I'll talk about this in the last 5 minutes. Before that, I would like to invite Dr. Gankar. Ma'am, what are your thoughts? You have seen it all. Last, but I think you can make the biggest impression here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, many points have been covered by Dr. Sancheti sir and Dr. Dheeraj Sanghai. Of course, academic credit policy is playing a very important role in terms of increasing the employability of the students and moving beyond the curriculum, and that's the main advantage. Now, when I look at it, of course, the Swayam, NPTEL, MOOCs, edX, Coursera, all these programs, we have a tie-up with edX and of course with the HBS online program, and we are giving those credits to our students. Benchmark remains the same, number of hours, and then the number of credit which have been transferred on the transcript and are counted as additional credit. AICTE guideline, UGC guideline in terms of number of credits, minimum number of credits are kept as a benchmark for across the university so that we can work on it. At campus, we have, as I've said, that now we have signed an MOU with Adobe also. What we are doing it, that we are mapping our curriculum with the expectations of industry, because every university students' requirements are totally different, right? In case of my university, our students, those who are coming across the country, right, and their expectations are totally different. So what we have done, the journey of the student has been mapped at the campus from the day one, that is from first semester to the end of the semester or the end of the program, what we have designed. Now, academic, the transfer of those credits are being mapped, identified in terms of program curriculum, learning objectives and program objective. And what rightly been said by Dr. Sancheti sir and of course Dr. Ponwar sir, that what we need to work on is more on autonomy, taking care of the or identifying a proper framework. Meta is one of the best example which has been this country has seen. So we have to really work on that. We need to come out with the more stronger platforms which will add a value. Why we are going towards the additional credit? The reason is that universities are trying to differentiate themselves, trying to make a difference in the students, the learning or employability part of it, right? And that part is required to be done very scientifically, and which we all are doing. The role of faculty members, the role of NEP 2020, where we are talking about multidisciplinary education, interdisciplinary education, transdisciplinary education, internationalization. I think there are many areas and objectives which are very important to be considered while doing this framework. So think tanks like us, we need to create such kind of platform and should come with a proper framework and can be submitted to the UGC. Very rightly said by Dr. Sancheti sir, government cannot go into the deep part of it. They are giving us the support. But now the time has come where we have to explore the opportunities with the autonomy which is given to us in this country, right? From state university to central universities, deemed universities and private universities, right? So I think we need to really collaborate with each other. We have signed an MOU with JKNU, but it has to come into a actual the implementation part of it, right? And that kind of stuff is required. So it's really wonderful what we are doing it, and the process has been getting involved. And I'm sure that faculty thinkers, they will, and especially the educationists and government organization should have that collaboration, and we can really come up very effectively. And there are certain challenges because like 3 years program, the student who has completed with certain the credit is been assessed by Babson, and Babson says that minimum these number of credits are required. So how can we map those with the international organization? So 3 years graduate program, can he go for the MS program where he's been selected, but now he is facing one challenge. This is what I have identified. So how can we overcome those? How can we go to the World Education Services? Those are doing the mapping of those things. I think these things, many things have been talked already, so I don't want to go on those points repeating again. But these are the concerns which we have to really taken into consideration and evolve the process. And maybe in due course of time, maybe 2-3 years it will take. So all these are certification programs, exit policies, graduate policies, having merging of various credits. I think all these are very wonderful interventions, but are required to be implemented effectively so that we can achieve the objective of Indian education. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think they're really great points made. I think there is definitely a synergy, which is a good thing to see, that everybody really wants, there is a strong intention. We want to look at academic transfer. We definitely understand that, you know, the processes can be made better. We are also looking forward to some body or some organization which can really create a framework. We already have frameworks in different countries, like Malaysia already has a wonderful framework. They're already implementing it with different universities. With all that in mind, we have been working at the World Assessment Council for the last 7 to 8 months, typically on this. And we have come up with something which is very exciting, which is 100% AI enabled. And we are working with our AI engineers and blockchain engineers who are really creating something like this, wherein this mapping, the transfer of credits, the mapping of courses, and of course, we can really working on the rubrics and the learning outcomes in a greater fashion. And we are calling it CredX. I'll quickly share my screen and take 5 minutes before we wrap up this session. And I'll be very happy to partner with your university if your university wants to be a part of CredX. And we have recently launched this, and we have recently shared this with universities from around the world. World Assessment Council is present in 21 countries. And there is some massive interest that we've already seen. How this will work, and of course, we have talked about the problem and how this can be solved. And you can really find this on World Assessment Council's page. And this is how the CredX system will work. When a university will join CredX, they will automatically be, be able to map with all the universities which are part of the whole network from different countries. those universities can also pick which universities do they want to share their credits with. So of course, a lot of times some universities may not really be able to partner with other universities, but of course it's a huge network. So you will be able to partner with universities, with like-minded universities, and share your credits. So first is a university mapping that happens. Then of course there is an automatic expressing interest and receiving interest from other universities from different countries who are willing to share credits with. The AI, now this is where the biggest thing will be taken off, because I understand there's a lot of manual work involved. Like for instance, Professor Sanchit was also talking about that students going to the campus and literally not able to figure out if there's those courses available. Technology can really solve all those challenges. Students from the dashboard itself can really figure out which are the courses available, which are the universities which are part of part of a collaboration with my university. Dr. Sanghi was also saying that, there are we understand that we work with universities and those things can be repeated. Of course, AI means repetition, and the AI can really take care of all those transactions happening. When it especially happens on a blockchain, it becomes very secure. So we're really working on a framework there. And then of course, students can really pick approved courses. Now this is very important. So there is no surprise package there. So the university knows, the parent university knows, and the host university knows that what is the course that is being taken. It is an approved course on a certain level. And then of course the transaction, like whether it is going to be an equivalence, whether it's going to be an actual transfer, whether it's going to be a global credential on the blockchain, whichever way we want to look at it, it becomes a very easy and scalable process. Like, even if we have Sanchit was saying that, what do we do if 10,000 students doing this every semester? This is where the technology can really take up everything, and it can really solve all those challenges of the university. You become truly global. You don't really have to work very hard signing a MOU with 100 universities. Just being on Credix platforms solve the problem. You automatically connect, and then automatically the transfer and the mapping and everything happens from the system itself. The benefits we already have discussed were the benefits for the students or the institutions. And of course, if you talk about all these institutions and all these universities globally which are part of this, will start showing up on our consortium. You will see them here. When you actually apply for Credix, right now we are in an expression of interest phase, and we already received interest from multiple universities globally. So you will be able to partner. So universities in USA, Canada, UK, of course, India, China, Australia, Germany, Malaysia, a lot of European universities. You can see the whole list here, and you can partner with them, and you can also decide what kind of exchange you want to do. You want to do offer courses to global students or accept global courses or students for your courses. And you also want to consider, giving credits or exchange of credits for self-paced online courses or instructor-led online courses or for on-premise courses. So a student doesn't literally have to visit those campuses. They can also do it online, because we're talking about a very digital world today. So all those things can happen. So if your university wants to be a part of Credix, please visit World Assessment Council, and you will see this at the top. You can click on this and you can express your interest. We will also work together. And that's very important. In the next 6 months, we'll also work together and figure out ways in which maybe we are able to come up with a model which can really be adopted by most of the universities in India, and of course, map you with other models which exist globally. With that note, thank you so much. Thanks for your time. We really look forward to working with you and creating the future of education, which is very global and very mobile. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot to learn. Thank you so much.